So picking up from the end of the previous episode, we see that Dabi has shown up right after Endeavor and Hawks have taken care of the high-end Nomu, and he's saying that he's here to collect the Nomu, but then just decides, hey, you know, since the number 1 and number 2 hero are both injured and just came off a big battle, let me try to take him out. But in the nick of time, the number 5 hero, Mirko, shows up and saves the day. We were introduced to Mirko at the end of the previous season when all of the Billboard heroes got together. But before she can hit Dabi, he says Yujiko, and we see like this black mist stuff come out of his mouth, teleport him away. So this is interesting because we haven't been introduced to a character named Yujiko yet, and we also don't know of any other affiliates that the League of Villains have at this point, especially named Yujiko. So the other interesting thing here is that they point out that we've seen this quirk before, and that's because we have. This is like the same teleportation black mist type quirk that we saw All For One using back in the Camino arc. But considering that All For One is currently in Tartarus right now, how is Yujiko able to do this with Dabi? So then we're coming to the other cliffhanger from the end of the previous episode, and that's that we're seeing Hawks secretly meeting up with Dabi, and I guess at first almost convincing us that Hawks is some kind of traitor here who worked together with Dabi to orchestrate a test for like the high-end Nomu. However, there's still, you know, mistrust on both sides, since Dabi didn't know that it was going to be Endeavor that Hawks was bringing, and Hawks didn't know that it was going to be the high-end Nomu that Dabi was bringing. But regardless, this was all for Hawks to try to convince Dabi that he is in fact working for the benefit of the League. And it seems like this has shifted, I guess, more trust on the side of Dabi, but he still says that, you know, you're not ready to see the boss yet. The boss, I assume, being Shigaraki. But thankfully, directly after this sequence, it's revealed that Hawks was directly contacted in secret by the Public Safety Commission to basically go on this undercover mission to infiltrate the League in order to get closer to them, as a way, of course, to take them down from the inside out. So then we come to Endeavor leaving the hospital, and we see that he has a brand new scar now. We obviously saw him pick this up in his battle against the high-end Nomu, and him and Hawks are just talking about basically the fallout of everything that happened, and how Endeavor obviously is acknowledging that, and what a coincidence that this high-end Nomu had shown up the same exact time that I was here as well. But he's not thinking that it was Hawks doing, or that Hawks had anything to do with it at all. It's just that, hey, we need to watch our backs, you know, be careful, and then they continue to go their own ways. We're also getting a mild flashback to Hawks' past here as a child, and we're seeing that he comes from some sort of tragic background or something. We see that as a kid, he's kind of like in squalor or something, and I guess it's the Public Safety Commission here that's finding him as a kid, and they're acknowledging that, like, even as a child, he has a natural gift. Like, his quirk is ridiculous and he's just precocious in general. We also see him holding like an Endeavor doll even as a kid, so that's setting up that he's always been looking up into Endeavor his whole life. And this whole aspect of Hawks' backstory and just character in general is also revealed in, I think, the last ending of season 4, when we see him like blindfolded training as a kid with the Public Safety Commission. So then we're coming back to the Todoroki residence, and I think this might be the first time that we're actually seeing Endeavor come together with all of his kids, Shoto, Fuyumi, and Natsuo. Not Toya, of course, because he's gone, but we'll get to him. But as soon as Endeavor comes in, it's made clear that there's tension here. Shoto still isn't really fully on board with Endeavor, and Natsuo just straight up still hates Endeavor. Fuyumi is the only one who is really trying to make things work here. So basically, Natsuo is angry at Endeavor for what you would think, everything that has been revealed about the backstory of this family here. It's said that he neglected his family, the kids, and even Rei, the mother. So he's not going to forgive him for that, but he specifically says, like, Mom screams, Shoto's crying, and what happened to our big brother Toya. So at this point, we still don't understand what's going on with Toya, the unaccounted for sibling of the Todoroki family. But another important aspect of this scene is that we're seeing that Endeavor is having this character arc at this moment. He is trying to change. Since becoming the number 1 hero, and since his near-death encounter with the high-end Nomu, he's kind of had this paradigm shift within him to where he realizes his mistake and is trying to, I guess, take accountability and rectifying his previous transgressions to the best that he can, or at least he's trying to start that. And this is ultimately summed up when Endeavor says, even if it's too late, I must atone. So then we're coming to what I guess could be considered the major significance of this episode, because we're coming to Izuku, who has fallen asleep after physical training, and he has this dream that's actually sending him back into the One For All world. And here he's seeing the previous users of One For All are also referred to as the Vestiges. Pretty sure this is the first time we're seeing most of them pretty much clearly, except for the two on the end. And that's pretty interesting how, like I said, we can see all of the other ones, but just not them. And Izuku even makes note of it himself. He also says, I had a dream like this before. He's referring to the sports festival when Shinso had used his quirk on him. And while he was in that state, he was able to see just silhouettes of the Vestiges at that point, and they allowed him to wake up from Shinso's quirk. But like I said, now we're seeing them more clearly than we ever have. And the one that we know for sure is Nana, who is like the teacher of All Might, who is also the 7th user of One For All. And oddly enough, we're also seeing like an energy, ethereal version of All Might's vestige as well, despite him still being alive. So then we're coming to a recreation of a memory, I suppose, of the first user of One For All, the brother of All For One. And I think this is showing us what had happened over 100 years ago, possibly, because I guess chronologically, that's around the time that quirks started to become prevalent. And it's also implied, I suppose, that All For One and his brother were like some of the first people to ever receive quirks. But another thing that's noting that this is a very long time ago is that the first user of One For All here is referring to quirks as meta powers. That's what people called quirks when they were like originally discovered. They weren't called quirks until like later on. But we're also seeing this sequence where it's establishing the like how All For One basically rose to power, or at least rose to public appeal. And that was obviously by accumulating people to serve him. And he would do this through various ways, I suppose, and one of them was by helping them, or just simply manipulating them into thinking that they are being helped by him. So we'll see somebody who's affected by a heteromorphic quirk that is making their lives awful, and we see a person who is quirkless that wants a quirk to enhance their lives. So he uses the All For One quirk to take the heteromorphic quirk for one guy, but then also at the same time giving a quirk to a quirkless person, therefore gaining their trust, because he says, you know, when I need you, will you help me? And they're like, absolutely. So he's kind of like becoming like a cult leader at this point. But as this goes on, we're starting to see that All For One is kind of like deluding himself into thinking that he's actually helping people, but at the same time, he's totally aware that he's like straight being evil here and like trying to manipulate the world, but also like passively aggressively trying to convince his brother, the first user of One For All, that what he's doing is altruistic here, but also not. It's just very strange the way that All For One speaks and acts in this sequence. So then we're just further seeing All For One's rise to power in the past, and then we're cutting to a future interaction between the first user and All For One. And this is the moment where All For One is giving the first user the power stockpiler quirk. That was like the original story of the All For One quirk. How originally it was just a quirk that allowed itself to be passed on to others. And it's being made out here that they probably thought that he was quirkless, because All For One basically says that he has no power, and that he had found a power that he can utilize, which is the power stockpiler quirk. So he forcefully gives it to him through the All For One quirk. And then, as the story said originally, the power stockpiler quirk fused with All For One. Like their two quirk factors fused together into one, and they became the One For All quirk. But then we cut to the first user now straight up interacting with Izuku. He says, you're the 9th one, right? Meaning the 9th user of One For All. And he says, but you're just barely at 20%, right? We're long past the singularity point, but it'll be fine. But then after this, Izuku wakes up and he sees that One For All is active within his arm. So now we're seeing that Izuku can now straight up interact with the previous users of One For All within the quirk itself. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments. If you liked the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.